Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jessica. I got a request to recreate this eyeshadow look, so in this video I'm going to take you step by step and we're going to talk about how I make my matte shadows super pigmented. I went ahead and did my base routine off camera so I can start with a fresh base with you guys. The first thing I'm going to do is prep my eyes. I'm using the Juvia's Place Eye Prep Eye Prime eyeshadow primer in the shade number 2. The formula for this primer is on the more watery side, so I make sure to mix all that product in there, shake it really well. This is the Too Faced Born This Way Multi-Use Sculpting Concealer in the shade Cocoa. This is also the shade that I used under my eyes. I try to keep a lot of the shades that I use on my face together. I like to group them just to make the final look blend together more seamlessly. I prefer to pick up this product using the Morphie M173 brush. This is discontinued, unfortunately, but you can find some similarities out on the market. I will go in and mix all those products together and start tapping it onto my lid. We're not doing any swiping motions yet. We just want to apply the product, spread it on across my lid so that it looks even, because we're starting to lay down our base. I know that e.l.f. and Real Techniques has a lot of the similar brushes that you can pick from. You just want something that's small and dome shaped, like a really dense brush, to be able to pick up cream product and lay it on smooth. You don't want any brush strokes. You can also use your finger to apply the eyeshadow base, but I want a more controlled area, so I will be using a brush. This is where my first tip comes in for my dark skin girls. If you're going to be doing an eyeshadow look and you're using very vibrant or light colors, I think that it's best to start off with a super light base. I know some people use a white eyeshadow base to start, but I like to mix this shade with my concealer or a little bit of my foundation mixing pigment just to tone it down a little bit. We don't want it to be flashback ghosty, but we definitely want a smooth light base so we can start adding colors and depth and dimension to our look. Once I'm happy with the way that everything is blended out, I'm going to set it with the Laura Mercier Translucent Loose Setting Powder in the shade Translucent Honey. This one matches the primer base that I have down, which is why I chose this shade, but you want to go for something that doesn't have a lot of pigment on it. Because we'll be building shadow off of this base, it doesn't really make sense to introduce color just yet. So whatever shade you choose, whichever formula, make sure that it's translucent and that it's meant to set. So this is kind of our first layer of protection when it comes to creasing. I like to set my powder using a powder puff, especially the triangle ones, so I can really get into the corners of my eyes, make sure that my entire lid is set, so that we can move on to the next step. The palette I'll be using today is Rem Beauty's Wicked for Good. This is definitely almost like a novelty item, but I love the shades in here. We have lots of ranges of browns, light and dark tan shades, and of course lots of shimmers and glitters. This palette also has shade names, so you will be able to follow along more closely. I'll make sure to have all of the details linked in the description along with the products that I'll be using today. I'm going in with the shade Kiamo Co. It's like a lighter brown shade, definitely not the darkest shade in this palette. I'm going to go into my crease and start tapping the product on there. Then I'm going to start swiping to blend it out into my lid, and I also will go into my inner corner and apply this shade and start blending it almost down into my nose contour and into my brow bone. And whatever product I have left over, I'm swiping into the center of my crease. This is where you can start building that shade and the depth for your shadow. I really like blending my shadow into my nose contour. I think it just makes the whole entire makeup look blend together more seamlessly, so I might go a little overboard with how far I drag this shadow down my nose, but once I'm done with all my makeup and I add my bronzer and everything, you'll see how well it blends together. Don't be too focused on if the shadow looks messy right now. We will be adding other colors, layering it on so it looks a bit cleaner, but you definitely want to like smoke this out over your lid into your crease because this is our first shade that we're laying down. I'm using a small fluffy brush to blend out this shadow. I want it to be able to pick up pigment, but not too much because we're blending this out into our base. So this is the perfect brush to do that with, just to make sure that our product is concentrated but not too harsh. As you can see, I'm almost following the shape of my natural brow bone in this case. So I'm making sure to flare out my shadow towards the end of my crease. I almost want like a cat eye look. So once I'm done blending it into my crease and my brow bone, I like flick it out towards the end because I want that snatched look. So that's kind of how I do that. And again, with this step, make sure that you are taking your time with blending. You don't want any super harsh lines. So make sure that both sides look evenly blended out before you move on to the next step. I'm going to take this small flat dome-shaped brush. It's a little fluffy. We're going to use that to apply our next shade. So I actually used 2 shades on my lid to try to make a color that I was happy with. I used the shade the Grimmerie and the Witching Hour. Because of the size of the brush, I'm able to concentrate where I want my shadow to be. And I have like deeper set lids, so I try to apply this shade a little bit above my crease so that when I look forward, you can still see my shadow. Otherwise, you won't really be able to see it unless I'm looking down. So this is definitely where I start to carve out my shadow. This has come just with practice, honestly, but if you're not able to do that, this would be the best place to cut your crease with some more concealer. You can use the concealer to create a more defined shape on your shadow, but I wasn't really going for that. I definitely wanted a blended out look, so I skipped that step and just went straight in with my eyeshadow using the color that I wanted for my lid and made sure to concentrate that around the lid. And you'll see later on that we'll blend the lighter shade and the darker shade together so that it transitions a little bit more smoother, because again, we don't want any harsh lines with this look. We're trying to make sure everything looks like it blends together. We're going to define my brow bone using the shade the Witching Hour. It's almost like a light tan shade. I'm going to go in with a fluffy brush trying to concentrate that shade just across my brow bone to add some highlight. We are using a matte shade instead of a shimmer for this look, so it's really important to have a contrast with your shades. That's why I'm using a different color from what I used on my lid, and I really like the way that this blends out. So I'm going to use tapping motions to pat that color on, and then I'm going to start slowly swiping it down to where my crease is to create a blended transition. And then I actually go back into my inner corners and add this shade to create a highlight, and I blend this color down the bridge of my nose to almost like reverse contour my nose contour. My main goal here is to create a blended look, so this is how I'm incorporating that light shade from our brow bone back into the rest of my look. This is the Makeup Revolution Mega Bronzer in the shade Dark. This is my favorite transition shade whenever I'm creating an eyeshadow look, and I will be using this later on to complete the rest of my makeup. So I thought it would be the perfect shade to blend out any harsh lines. So I go over my crease, blend that out, make sure it looks transitioned, and then I go back up to where my brow bone and my crease shadow is, and then I'll go back in and blend that out as well. I'm using a skinny pointed fluffy brush to blend this out, just so I have more precision for where I want that shade to be. And I think this helps layer on my shade so it doesn't have to look too harsh when I apply it. I'm going to smoke out my lash line using the shade Wickedly Wonderful. This is definitely a deeper, darker brown, and I think it blends perfectly with the rest of my shadows, especially because I'll be adding mascara to my lash line. So I'm going to go in and apply this shade only to the halfway point of my lash line. I don't go all the way in, but I do want to create like a smoked out wings. So I add it to the tail end of my crease and underneath my lash line so I can create a smoky, sultry look. You don't want this part to be super blended out. We really want to concentrate it to underneath our eyes. So I used a really dense, small, flat brush to apply this shadow, and I did a lot of swiping motion, so I didn't really have to pat on the shadow for this one because of the type of brush it is. So I just went in and smoked it out. Now I'm going in to tightline my waterline using a nude pencil. This is one of my favorite hacks for making my eyes look a little bit bigger without the dramatics of a white liner. I just think that for this natural look that we're going for, the nude shade blends a lot better. Once I'm happy with that, I'll go in and add mascara to my top and bottom lashes. You can use whatever product works for you, but this is the Estee Lauder Extreme Lash Multiplying Volume Mascara in the shade Extreme Black. I really love the applicator tip for this mascara. I want a very light and flirty look, so instead of going in with the full strip lash, I'm going in with some regular lash glue and my lash clusters towards the very end of my lashes to create like a subtle, more natural, flirty look, and again, like accentuating that cat eye effect that we created with the shadows. So the lengths that I used for this look were 14, and I only used 2 towards the tail end of my eyes to just like transition my lashes. I don't want anything too dramatic. I definitely want the focus of this look to be on the shadow. I will have the lash clusters that I used linked in the description. You are more than welcome to use any style that you want, but I like how volumizing these clusters are, which is why I chose them. And I apply these underneath the lashes to hide that lash band. Let me know if you guys want another base makeup routine. I wore foundation for this look, which I typically don't do during the summer months, but I went for a soft glam look today, and you have to have foundation for that. I love a pink and nude makeup look, so I really enjoyed the final product. And once I set everything, this is the final look. I hope you feel a little bit more comfortable trying to do different shadow looks. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!